All right. So one of the things that I want to talk to you about today, and I think it's timely going into a little bit of uncertainty with the Canadian economy next year. We know that it's a slow season right now. It's a really good time to be forming a strong foundation for more prospecting going into 2026. In a perfect world, I'd love to send attention today that we just all collectively agree, let's all individually have the best year that we've ever had in 2026. And let's make a foundation by not annoying people, but rather providing a ton of value so as they're coming around and being drawn to us instead. So what I wanted to talk about today and how I fancied it up in a title is I want you to stop prospecting, which sounds counterintuitive, and rather I want you to start providing. So by the end of this presentation, I'm hoping that you'll walk away with enough knowledge or understanding of how we can start focusing on a more trust-based lead generation. And then to address the other part of the slide, my name's Mike. I love I'm a big reader, appreciate someone who appreciates arts. And so I came across this quote the other day, and it was very interesting. It was, "The world doesn't need more mindless stuff. Labeled as unique, there's no heart to it." Okay. And that was from Brendan Saller. So it's a really interesting quote because when you think about realtors as a whole, collectively, we could probably agree that most of the realtors in the cities that we operate on don't provide a tremendous amount of value, get, a couple of deals here and there, but they're not really providing anything beyond what should be a very basic expectation of someone in our role. So what I want to do is I want to take us above the kind of humdrum of being a realtor and focus more on becoming an educator and someone who provides value first, right? Not, chasing down people, cold calling them, annoying them, by knocking on their doors and all that stuff. I want to really lead with value so that people are drawn to working with us rather than us continually pushing the envelope with people, annoying them. And I'm not saying that we should stop that. I think we just need to change how we're going about doing it. There's been a little bit of a lie that we've been told. And if you're newer to the industry, I'm sure you heard it. You come in, you cold call, door knock, DM strangers on social media. You're chasing all these leads, but at the crux of it, they don't trust you because it's still cold, right? So over time, with email sequences, automated text messages, actual calls, and investing in that relationship, you can certainly build that trust. However, what I want to position today is a way that you can actually just lead with trust, right? So the first engagement, you're already building a significant amount of trust with that person. In the end, I want you to be able to support people towards a purchase of their house, right? It's whether it's my own preference or kind of how I look at things. Arguably, people are spending the most amount of money they will ever spend in their entire life in one transaction with you. And we get paid fairly well to do that, right? If you push them into something that they don't necessarily want, it's almost more damaging to your relationship than if you continue to support them to help them find something that they actually want. Okay, so you'll notice throughout this presentation, there's a big theme of, you know, being a little bit different than the typical realtor out there. And I'll say this right up front, I don't necessarily like realtors, right? I am one, but I try to do things a little bit differently so that we can actually enjoy a good client relationship that provides referrals on a regular basis. So I don't want you to sell people on houses. I want you to support them into buying houses. Okay. All of this comes down to trust, right? Realistically, if you're not coming forward with more than here's your automatic property search, it's going to get to you every morning at 8 a.m., probably along with the other six realtors who have done the exact same thing. Clients today have unlimited online information. There's ads everywhere, so their choices are abundant, and they also have every reason not to trust you. Very few people who find anything online have a large amount of suspicion. And rightfully so, because we see it in RICO complaints, we see it in, big news stories that come out, we see it all over social media, we see it in companies that are emerging now that they're providing ultimately what a bad realtor provides anyway for less than 1%, right? So it's that idea of why don't I just use them? So when you're thinking about your business, I want you to think like money is super important. It's what pays the bills, it what gets you the groceries and all that. But when you're looking at the value of your CRM and your list of potential clients, I want you to look at trust. I think trust is the real currency going forward, right? And that doesn't necessarily come from scripted, objection handling. It doesn't come from slogans because those are super easy to write and they don't necessarily come from ads. Each of those in their own odd way are very helpful in developing the relationship. But what I want to do is again, rise above what everybody else is doing. And so how do you do that, right? In a world where everyone is so focused on, are you ready to sell your house? Do you want to buy a house? If we list today, you can get this, right? That's prospecting. And those are important conversations to have. But what I want to do is I want to build it so that they're, rather than going into my CRM as a prospect where we're having very surface level conversations, I want them coming in as a lead or even a client who's actually signed on to a buyer representation agreement. And in order to do that, I need to be able to provide a tremendous amount of value very quickly. Okay. So some of those little things can be, neighborhood market reports, homeowner savings checklists, first-time landlord guides, renovation ROI reports. And those are going to help in a small way to continue to build trust, right? Let's say I'm producing a bi-weekly neighborhood market report out to my list of, whatever, 5,000 people. Um, and they're all interested in keeping up to date on that neighborhood's comings, goings, impacts, and all that. At some point, I will have given them so much material above and beyond what they are getting from other people um, that they're just going to call me up and say, "Hey, I've been reading your market reports. This is a very interesting point that you made on the last one. How does that impact our search?" And I've had this happen where, if you're on my team, you guys know I send 3 emails a week. One of them is a deal of the week, one of them is a market update, and one of them is an like a story, for lack of better words, that relates somehow to real estate. I've been doing that religiously since I started. And, just recently I had someone call up that had been quietly reading all of my emails for the better part of 2 years before they ended up making a decision. Now, from a time scaling standpoint, I didn't have to do all that much extra because I was doing the market reports anyway. So when you're thinking about kind of the lifetime value of that client, to a certain degree, you can write them off after a certain period of time, but continue to reach out to them, continue to provide that value because that value is going to be important in the long run. And I asked them why they did business with me versus anyone else. And they had said that they had opted into a tremendous amount of ads, but nobody was contacting them as much or as regularly as I was. And they weren't giving them anything beyond, are you ready to buy now? Hey, did you see this house? Would you buy it? Right? This is the importance of going above and beyond to get just slightly quality more information and giving it into people's hands, right? The knowledge is what you guys have. The service and the purchase, that comes after the fact, right? If you're sitting there, like, yes, our job is to sell or, transact on property, whether it's residential, commercial, leasing, renting, buying, whatever that is. That's the service that we could provide. In order to get there, though, we do need to spend a tremendous amount of time building trust and knowledge of what we can do at any given time with a particular product or particular neighborhood or market, or, in terms of economic cycles, right? Like a lot of agents probably should be preparing for communications about price reductions and how to manage days on market and all that kind of fun stuff. That is the knowledge that you have to bring to the table and then how do you bundle that knowledge into a very easy gift for the person? And that's sort of what we're going to be talking about today, because when we can engage the psychology of reciprocity, they're going to feel like and I say this word and it's a strong word, but they're going to feel obligated to come back to us with their business, right? If somebody, excuse me, if I've worked with somebody or communicated with them for 2 years and I've educated them with almost every email, I'm sure some of them weren't fantastic, but if I've educated them on most of the emails that I've sent, I've created a ton of clarity on the market that's going on, and I've given them an opportunity to understand that working with me can save you money, it'll save you stress. Certainly, some mistakes were shared in the stories that I was sending people, and they hit home, right? So when I'm communicating that much information with them, and it's not a pressure, hey Kevin, are you ready to buy that house now? That's pretty high pressure. Then, it feels a little bit grimy. But if I just continue to add in the information, at some point, Kevin's going to want to do business with me. And it's because of the law of reciprocity. So leading with value will always come back, to you, or at least I believe that to be true. And in my experience, it has been, right? But it's hard to stay committed because there were times I would send out the emails and, send out the automated text messages, and then nothing comes back. But the more active you are, the more you're educating a group of people, you're going to find more and more people who want to be educated by you and in turn start to do business with you. And these people are generally the best clients that you want to have for the lifetime of your business anyway. Okay. Now, I know that, I've had a lot of conversations with people and, even last week in our team meeting, like a lot of the times people don't know how to necessarily design the content, right? Everybody has the content in their brains. We go about our lives, building that content, right? Every transaction is an opportunity to build that content repertoire in your brain. So for example, I've been sitting on it for a while just because I've gotten a bit too busy, and I had been doing a lot of divorce settlement listings and purchases throughout this past year. And as a result, I've come to learn that there's some things that you should, consider when you're getting divorced with regards to your real estate. So what I essentially did is just did an AI dump into ChatGPT and said, here's everything that I need, out of my head into your, you know, mega mind or whatever we want to call it. Turn this into a valuable, book. And AI organized all my thoughts. They, created out the grammar, the syntax, all that, and did an entire book on, important things to, I believe they called it important things to consider in divorce real estate edition or something like that. And I could, in theory, take that PDF that I've created, give it to someone who's going to make a book out of it, and that would be my lead magnet, right? And I'm not talking just, I'm going to run some ads. That's an in where I can take it to family lawyers and say, hey, I want to give you copies of this book. Can you just leave them out and your clients can grab them? Right? That's a very interesting in, even just for that family lawyer. You know, that that conversation could lead to, a couple of lunches, maybe a few coffee things, getting to know each other's business really well, referrals both ways, because, you're likely going to run into people who are getting divorced as well. They're obviously running into people who are getting divorced, and they need people on their roster to essentially give multiple options to their clients. Now, if you've been giving them all this really great information, regardless of whether it's made by AI or you naturally or you hire a ghostwriter, you've given them something that they can actually give to their clients, and that makes them look better as well. So those info packages are vitally important to leading with trust. And there's a million different ways that you can go out and and meet people or prospect with a trust-based kickoff to that relationship. So I would really encourage you guys to, sit back and go, okay, what would this look like if I was to create a, 90-page electronic book, right? Some of the other cool things, you could easily take that, just sell it on, Amazon or whatever. So I was looking at it, and within the thread of me creating the divorce book, it took about 15 minutes, right? And I kind of thought about some other kind of easier ins because like if you haven't been doing divorce settlement stuff, you may not lead with that. But let's say that you used to be a handyman and you're now also a realtor. Well, you probably have an extensive amount of knowledge on what renovations in a flip are going to result in the highest ROI, right? If you have a tremendous amount of experience with relocation, right? Or, you're looking at reports and say, okay, typically people will live in this neighborhood and then they kind of settle in, their house goes up, and then they move to this neighborhood. Like you can report back on kind of the patterns in a city. That's a very high value ticket, especially when people go, oh, I'm living in such and such a suburb, but now I want to move here. Oh, interesting. Did you know that, X amount of people actually do that each year because this is the natural stepping stone neighborhood to that because of schools, because of work, because of whatever, right? Everything like that is going to help build your professionalism and their trust in you. Same thing. This is one that is actually quite interesting, and I've done it myself, right? When you're placing tenants into rental units. Hey, have you ever thought of buying a house? Yeah, it's just not for me right now. No problem. Most of my clients, most of my best clients that were tenants are now investors, and this is the guide they followed, right? Boom. You've given them some information, and some of them may not ever have interest in being an investor, but maybe they want to own a house, right? So help them with a guide on how to, be a good tenant and work towards buying your own property as well, right? And then, the divorce seller roadmap, that was another one that, I had done earlier this year. And all of it is really good information and it does work in creating really high amounts of trust really quickly. Okay. And the one thing is most realtors like this is not exclusive knowledge. Everyone knows that they could be doing something like this. I can promise you there are very few that actually implement any sort of, effort above and beyond, managing their CRM, running some Facebook or YouTube ads, and kind of sticking with what most people do. Okay. What, so how you can provide the most amount of value is by picking one target audience, right? And I want you to solve their number one problem, right? If you're working with downsizers, right? That should say where to next, but it actually says where to next. Um, that would be a really interesting discussion, right? You guys are downsizing. You have this 5-bedroom house. You raised your 3 kids. They're all out. What do you do now? Right? Boom. Here in my experience are all of the things that people who are in your shoes tend to think about. Would you like this book as value for your decision? Yes. Now, let's say those downsizers are talking to 3 other agents and everyone's given them roughly the same package to the same, to a certain degree, but you've also given them a very specific book that now has, all the questions that they have at the back of their mind that they may not even have thought about, right? Investors, is this property going to cash flow? That's pretty much the only thing that they're interested in right now, especially given today's, interest rate and rent market. Families, are you looking for particular schools? For someone, I saw it the other day, someone had done the Ottawa School Guide, right, as content. And, he's broken down neighborhoods and it's really taken on a life of its own where he's attracting a ton of people strictly on the discussion of what school will your kids go to, right? Same thing, small developers. You can, Ottawa, where we live, is doing a huge zoning reorganization or rezoning, well, in January. There's a lot of questions out there about what that means and how people can manage that to build more efficient rental buildings, right? So that might be, if that's a forte of yours, start creating, tangible content that people consume based on that. And I think it's always important to know, like when you look at kind of the top earners in really any industry, the specialists are always earning more. The generalists are the ones whose businesses ebb and flow, right? They're continually working, they're continually hustling, whereas the specialists are attracting people. And, everyone's had that conversation probably as an early agent, hey, Mr., realtor who's been in here for like 80 years, how are you getting your clients? Oh, they just referred me. Well, maybe that's true after 25 years, but what were you doing in your first 2 years? And most of them either don't know, or if they do give you something, they're lying because they've come to appreciate a particular way of doing business, and it's because they're specialists. And sometimes that specialty can just be lasting so long in a market that it is perceived that you know a lot about it, right? I don't want that for any of you guys. I wouldn't do it for myself. I want to give people tangible content that's providing actual value to their lives because I want you all to be specialists. Now, are you going to turn down your buddy who's like, hey, I just got an inheritance and I want to buy a condo? Probably not, right? You get a couple of ads or some people that don't fit the exact thing. Probably not, right? But if your schedule is packed with people who are, within your very specific niche, you should or might want to consider referring those leads out because the more you focus on things that aren't in your target audience, the more generalist you become, and you will be bogged down by more the busy work of the job, right? So, you know, that's a high quality problem to have, and you can always cross that bridge when you get there. But what I would like everyone to consider is setting an intent for who they want to talk to. And more specifically, why do you want to talk to those people? A lot of people are like, hey, I really want to work with investors because it's perceived that they generally, do higher ticket items. Yes, that would be true, but you need to know what you're talking about. Otherwise, you're going to look like a dodo and you're not going to be able to speak the same language. You're not going to be able to provide value, and you're not going to be in a situation where they're actually going to want to do business with you. You're likely going to become the person that chases them in emails going, what do you think about this property? Oh, I already saw it, doesn't fit my thing. Oh, what about this one? Doesn't fit my model. Use those as opportunities. What does fit your model or what is your model? I'd like to learn more from you. And then when you get that learning, you can translate that into other discussions that you're having. So these aren't set in stone. They can be quite fluid. But what I want people to think about is becoming a specialist in a topic that they can service people incredibly well in. Okay. And I can't answer that for you. We can do a question and answer period at the end and try and figure it out for you if you want. But I just want everyone to keep in mind, specialists will earn more. Generalists generally chase more and have more volatile income coming in. So, what it, the whole process is a lot more fluid than, 5 steps, but realistically, this is mostly how it goes, right? You create a valuable info product, right? So, you have a guide on, how first-time home buyers are maximizing their purchase prices through grants with the government or whatever that looks like. And again, I just spitballing that. If you really want to work with first-time home buyers, you're going to go out, you're going to offer it for free on your socials, you're going to email it to people, or if you're going to actually print it off, give it in person, right? And it doesn't have to be a big fancy, leather bound book. It can be a smaller kind of flattened PDF book. The other option here, and you could post it up on Amazon, right? There's print on demand services with Amazon. I've seen a couple of people become like fairly prolific book writers by doing this, right? And they're going to get leads from all over the place. And thankfully, we're all with EXP. We all have really great relationships with agents in other cities. So there's referral opportunities there. You obviously have to capture their contact information. The amount of people I've seen with really great information and no way to actually get their leads contact info is alarming, right? You've spent all this time creating this valuable info product. You've marketed it out on your socials, emails, maybe you've even paid for ads, but then you don't capture their contact information. That's a completely lost opportunity. You want typically, name, phone number, email. If you really want to push it and find the highest quality people, you also want to learn a bit more about their story. So you'd need to ask some more specific questions afterwards. Sending value consistently. If I were to walk into a family lawyer and say, "Hey, I want to give you this book," right? You can share it with your clients. They go, "Oh, thanks so much," and they put it off to the side. If I never contact that person again, it is most unlikely that they're not going to want to do business with me either, right? Now, on the flip side, to kind of illustrate with a story, like I've been doing a number of foreclosure listings with one of the banks. I meet with their president of mortgages almost every 2 weeks minimum. and we're talking about the market. We're talking about the experience with the properties. We're just growing a very organic, good relationship built over beer. Like you need to be in contact with your leads consistently, right? Email, phone calls, drop-ins if that's appropriate, whatever that might be. Continually share the things that you're learning with the people that you with people who have opted in to hear from you, to keep it fairly simple there. And in the end, the client is just going to call you and be like, I'm ready to work with you now. Hey, I saw this property. I'm interested in buying it. Let's go do it. Okay, great. Can you tell me what property? Because I have no idea, right? So I want you to get to a point where you're providing so much value and it's not having a tremendous impact on your schedule because you can do a lot of this sort of at scale. With the right CRM, of course, so that you could be in a position where you are providing value on a regular basis. It's only taking you, maybe an hour or two a week to set it all up. And then you're just following up, making relationships, and people are going to start coming to you or referring you because you are the top of mind in a particular topic. Okay. So again, I want to help you guys kind of walk away with some ideas. I get very higher level kind of spitballing them, right? You could do a, Ottawa downsizer guide or, Canada investor ROI calculator, renovation ROI cheat sheet or whatever that might be, right? I think that's one of those things where you just find what you like to talk about and then put it on paper or put it on a screen or whatever that might be. And there's a whole bunch of ways you could do this. Like, I'm really obsessed with the idea of with wealth and specifically like the psychology of it. So I've turned that into a presentation that I'm going to be doing early next year, hopefully with people, on their what do they call them? New Year's resolutions of like, I need to save more, I want to buy a property this year, whatever that is. And there's not so far in the presentation, there's nothing about real estate. It's all speaking to the psychology of wealth creation, right? That's one of those things. It's going to be a presentation. I might try to make a little book out of it so that's at least a hand away. And that's just a byproduct of being in the industry, understanding investments, having a keen interest in investments, and then wanting to talk about that. And there you go. So, I'll probably pull 15 to 20 people to that presentation. And if one of them does business with me, fantastic, right? Think about kind of as you go about your day, almost everything that you do can turn into some kind of content, right? Add those to your guides. These don't need to be static things that never change. Make the template so that you can add stuff as you go or change things, right? Because if you're talking about, how a seller can exceed in a really heavy buyer market, the timeliness might not be, good for that. Now, if you change the wording to, how a seller can walk away without losing their shirt in a buyer's market, maybe someone's a little more interested in that because it's timely, right? Same thing. You get a phone call from a client, they ask a particular question. Even if you don't know the answer, you just default to very interesting question. I'm going to find you that answer. Go find the answer and then talk about that answer to other people, right? Almost every action is an opportunity for additional content to your guides. Okay. Again, like I kind of put this in and it's not tongue in cheek, but realistically, if you were to walk away, you could pick a niche today that you already know a lot about. You could pull up ChatGPT, put it into AI, and it's going to spit out a guide. And then you're going to take that guide and you're going to give it away in an attempt to earn permission to help people further. It's really not much more complicated than that. Where a lot of people are going to get stuck is step one, where they're going to get analysis paralysis because they say, I want to talk about everything to everyone because I want my business to just boom right now because, maybe it's been a minute since the last commission or whatever that might be. A lot of people get paralyzed at the very first step. Okay. And then the second part of it is usually between step two and three, where they have this amazing guide and then they're like, I don't know how to give this away. Okay. So if you're stuck on the first one, just understand that no matter what you choose to talk about today, you're not committed to this for your lifetime. you can divorce that niche, right? You can sit there and say, I thought I wanted to talk about, whatever investors, but now as I'm doing it, I realize I still have a lot to learn. I'm going to work on, strictly, sellers of duplex properties or whatever that might be. Now that's hyper niche and you probably should avoid that. But there, know that you can go and make mistakes and you'll still be okay, right? So just pick something, roll with it. Between step two and three, how do you get this information out? Um, I don't know if it's possible to go back to past recordings, but I've talked about more tactical lead generation um, in plenty of presentations, right? There's social media guides, get out there and put your name out there. You can do, mailers if you have a budget for it. I really like going to centers of influence where this is actually relevant, right? I was talking to some guy in one of the suburbs in Ottawa, and he made a renovation guide, and he's like, I don't know what to do with it. I was like, walk into the home hardware and say, hey, can I leave these on your counter? And he's like, they'll never let me do that. And I said, why don't you give it a try? And sure enough, he went in, talked to the manager, and the manager's like, yep, no problem. So I think he did that about 4 or 5 months ago, and he's had one lead from it, right? So that's a lead that he hasn't done much to do, but that's someone who's calling him will likely sell or buy a property, and that commission might be, ten to $15,000. And all he spent was, probably about an hour creating the guide. I believe he spent $15 with Vistaprint to print the guides. Now, I'm not sponsored by Vistaprint or anything, so I don't benefit, but that's just the name that I believe he used. And, he printed out the guides and left them in, 30 minutes to drive to the home hardware and left them there, right? It's easy, but most people won't do it. So what I want you guys to do is allow yourselves to be brave enough to try, right? If you're sitting there throughout the, December season, pull yourself up, your little cup of eggnog and put your whiskey in or whatever you need to do and sit down and hack it out. It's an hour or 2 hours. You can do it over a night. It's a really valuable activity. And even just the activity of doing it will help you advance your knowledge as a realtor. So I highly recommend doing it. It's been something that has worked for me in the past. It's something that's working for people currently. Um, Allow yourself the bravery to go out and, put yourself out there and be an author in the space. I think that's very important and it builds a tremendous amount of credibility. And again, like I've kind of just talked about this throughout. It's going to allow your closings to happen just so much better. Now, I'm not talking about your client's closing. I'm talking about when you put the pen to paper with a, buyer representation agreement or a listing agreement or your agreements of purchase and sale. What I want you guys to remember, and I'm going to keep heading this home, you have to provide value to people. And that value needs to be good, right? They need to remember it. Because when they're ready to make a move, invest, or even refer a friend, you will not be chasing the business because you'll actually be chosen above the noise of everybody else. So when you guys think about your vision planning and all that for 2026, I want you guys to think about how you can be chosen as someone's realtor versus earning that person's approval of you, right? I want you guys to keep getting that value down there, like into their hands, and make sure that when the time comes and they are genuinely ready, that you are the only person that they're going to consider. Okay. And that's going to lead to a tremendously successful 2026. And you have a whole holiday season to get that done because, depending on who you are, you may not have a whole lot going on in December, right? But you can start really framing up an amazing 2026 just by making some tactical decisions now about how you want to shape your business for 2026. And I believe that's my last slide. So I'm going to kick back to um, you guys having to see my ugly mug. And if there's any questions, I want to kind of open it up now because like I'm super excited about 2026. Like I've got a bunch of cool stuff on the go. And if you guys have any questions, now would be the time to hack them out. And if not, I'm going to down my coffee and close this off.
Hi, Mike. I do have a question. When you're
Yeah.
putting a story together, like when you're
Hmm.
putting in your mail out, like once a month or once every couple of weeks, how would you frame that? Like what?
So I'll be very clear. I send it out every Friday.
Okay.
So every single week I'm sending it out. So to give you an idea, the one I sent out last week was a story between a dad, a son, and a donkey. And they were walking down a mountain and they walked past some villagers and the son was on the donkey and the villagers go, "Oh, look at that dad, he's tiring out the donkey." Right? So then he takes his son off the donkey and they keep walking. They go, "Why isn't that dad helping his son, you know, stay well?" And he's
Yeah.
riding the donkey. So he puts him back on, and then the donkey starts getting tired. And then everyone's like, "That poor donkey, he's just walking around. He's getting really tired." And like they were getting criticisms no matter what they did, right? So then the dad's like, "Okay, well, based on their criticism, I'm going to put the donkey on one shoulder, I'm going to put my son on the other one, and I'm going to walk." And then everyone's laughing at them. And then he gets really tired and they fall off a cliff, right? If you make everybody around you happy, no one's going to be happy and you're going to be, at
Okay.
fault. But I'll relate it to, here's how it relates to real estate. You're never going to find something that makes you 100% happy. But here's my 80/20 rule about if you have 80% of things that make you happy, there's 20% of things that you could probably put off to the side. That's probably the house for you. And
Okay.
and like I'll get emails back being like, "I have no idea how you related, a dude carrying a donkey down a mountain to what I should be
I
doing
love it.
with my purchase, but you somehow did." So,
Yeah.
and those are just kind of like I have the benefit of having three young kids, so I'm reading a lot of really crazy stories anyway,
Yeah.
like life lesson stuff. But if you enjoy literature, you could very easily craft stories that relate to, a showing in the week or whatever that might
Yeah.
be.
My favorite niche is downsizing with downsizers
Right.
or like problem solving for downsizers or divorce. I do a lot with divorce.
Yep.
And so yeah, just look up some stories, maybe even you know, that might be a good idea. But I really like that. I really like that concept. So do you put that on like a newsletter or you just send out a story?
I send out plain, like, and this is something that I've been asked a lot. I send out a plain text email.
Okay.
There's no images, there's just text.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. No, thank you very much. Your presentation was amazing. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And always call your subscribers. Like my open rates right now are like 46% on average. I get zero bounces and zero unsubscribes.
Do you
Anyone?
do Bomb Bomb?
No, I use Follow Up Boss and High Level, depending on
Okay.
who I'm emailing.
Okay. No, great presentation.
Awesome.
Any other questions? Got 18 more minutes, or we just start our day a little earlier. I think we're all good. How much did Vistaprint pay? Vistaprint did not pay me, but I'm hoping to one day have a brand deal with Vistaprint. Of all places, I don't know. All right. Well, if that is all, I know that this is going to be recorded, so you can always go back to it. Pretty sure all of you guys have my email anyway, but in case you don't, I'll just throw it in the chat and you can ask me questions. I know there's a few of you in the room next door. We can jam up. And yeah, looking forward to hearing how amazing 2026 goes for you guys. So I appreciate you listening in and having some fun with me. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks,
Uh,
Mike.
have a great day.